It started on a perfect Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and I was finally enjoying a quiet swim in my backyard pool. Suddenly, the calm shattered. A shadow loomed over the water. My heart skipped a beat. There she was, Karen, the notorious HOA troublemaker, glaring at me like I'd personally offended the universe. Karen wasn't supposed to be here. Our neighborhood had rules she had violated countless times, and yet there she was, stepping boldly onto my property, muttering about community rights and what I'm allowed to do. I froze, unsure if I should confront her directly or call the authorities. But then I noticed something peculiar. Her every step triggered subtle flashes of light across the pool deck. Hidden sensors I had installed weeks ago, just for situations like this, were quietly observing her every move. She hadn't even seen them yet. Karen was pacing closer to the pool, her hands flailing, her voice rising as she pointed and complained about the invasion of public space. I held my breath, pretending to casually sip my drink, while the sensors silently began recording her reactions. She leaned over the pool's edge, squinting at the water, and without warning, stepped in. Instantly, a soft alarm sounded, a harmless yet startling chime that echoed across the backyard. Karen jumped back, yelping as if she'd touched fire. Her face turned bright red, a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. I could hardly contain my laughter. These sensors weren't just security devices. They were just as disguised as technology. I had imagined her reaction 100 times, but seeing it unfold in real life was priceless. What happened next would push Karen over the edge, and she had no idea I was ready. The tension was thick, the drama palpable. Neighbors began to peek over fences, curious about the commotion, while Karen fumbled, unsure of what to do next. My pool had become the stage for a showdown that she never expected, and I never wanted to miss. Karen was about to learn that messing with me wasn't just a mistake, it was a trap, carefully set. Every reaction, every word, and every flail was captured by the sensors. This was more than a confrontation, it was entertainment. And she was the unknowing star. Karen's yelp had barely faded when she regained her composure. Or at least tried to. Her face was a mix of fury and embarrassment, veins bulging at her temples. She glared at me with the intensity of a storm, muttering about how I was breaking HOA rules and being unreasonable. Yet, every step she took was under the watchful eyes of my hidden sensors, capturing her every move with precision. She circled the pool cautiously, inspecting the water as if trying to find a way to reclaim her supposed territory. I couldn't help but notice the jitter in her stance, a subtle but unmistakable sign that she was on edge. The sensors had done their job perfectly, turning her usual swagger into hesitant, clumsy movements. Her tone shifted, dipping into a mix of fear and frustration. Karen was no longer the confident invader. She was the prey in a game she didn't even know she was playing. At this point, the alarm system triggered another feature, a faint mist over the pool's edge, a harmless but startling effect that shimmered in the sunlight. Karen recoiled dramatically, stepping backward as if the water itself had come alive to repel her. Her hands flailed, knocking over a garden chair, which clattered loudly against the deck. I stifled a laugh, pretending to be absorbed in my pool float, all while the sensors quietly recorded every second. Neighbors now had full view of the spectacle. Some hid behind their fences, others took out their phones. Word about Karen's pool invasion was spreading. Meanwhile, Karen tried to regain control, pointing angrily at the sensors I had strategically placed and demanding I turn them off. Immediately, she stomped closer, only to trigger another sensor, which caused a soft yet unmistakable flash of light across the deck. Karen shrieked, waving her arms, losing all remaining composure. It was at that moment I realized just how predictable her reactions had become. Every threat she made, every accusation, every attempt to regain dominance was captured perfectly. The sensors weren't just tools, they were mirrors reflecting her. Ridiculous behavior back at her, magnified and undeniable. And the best part? She had no idea she was the star of her own public embarrassment. Karen's frustration reached its peak. She stomped and yelled, but the sensors calmly continued their work, recording, alerting, and amplifying her meltdown in real time. Her presence in my backyard had become a public spectacle, and there was no turning back. Every step she took now carried the weight of her own humiliation. Karen's eyes darted around wildly, searching for an escape route. Every corner of my backyard seemed rigged with surprises she hadn't noticed yet. The hidden sensors, designed to detect motion and proximity, had now become her nemesis. Each step she took triggered a tiny chime, a subtle mist, or a shimmer of light that made her jump, stumble, and swear under her breath. The more she tried to assert control, the more chaotic her behavior became. Her usual Karen confidence had evaporated, replaced by visible panic. She attempted to back away from the pool, but one misstep sent her foot splashing into the water. A loud gasp escaped her as the sensors recorded the splash, immediately triggering a light shimmer and another faint chime. Her expression was priceless, equal parts shock and fury, as if the pool itself had turned against her. Neighbors peeked from windows and fences, and I could hear muffled giggles as word spread of Karen's antics. Karen tried to shout over the alarms, demanding I turn off this nonsense. Yet her voice lacked its usual authority. The sensors had turned her own aggression into comedy. She stomped, gesticulated, and waved her arms, each motion activating a different sensor. A subtle puff of mist rolled along the deck, startling her further, and she tripped slightly, catching herself just in time. Her frustration was palpable. She looked around as if the backyard had transformed into a trap she could not escape. Desperate, she attempted to storm out, but the sensors had another trick, a soft, pulsing light along the pathway she had taken. Every step triggered an alert on my hidden monitor. I watched in amusement as she flailed toward the gate, only to find her path marked by harmless but startling effects. Lights flickering, faint chimes ringing, and even a small spray of mist brushing her clothes. She stopped mid-step, frozen, as though she had walked into an invisible barrier. At this moment, I realized the genius of the setup. The sensors were more than just security. They were psychological warfare, turning her aggression into panic and confusion. She had no clue I was in control, that every reaction, every misstep, and every flustered outburst was anticipated and recorded. Karen's meltdown had become artful theater, her anger and embarrassment painting a picture I could hardly believe was real. Finally, she paused, chest heaving, eyes wild, and glanced at me with a look that mixed fury and disbelief. She had underestimated my preparation, my backyard, and most importantly, me. This confrontation was far from over, and I had only just begun to savor the chaos. Karen's chest heaved as she tried to regain composure, muttering about "this is ridiculous," and "I'll get you for this." But the backyard, my carefully orchestrated stage, was now fully in control. The sensors, previously subtle, were now subtly escalating her chaos. Every move she made triggered a sequence of harmless but startling effects. Tiny bursts of mist, flashes of light, and chimes that echoed her anger back at her. She stomped toward the pool, determined to assert dominance, only to trigger a section of the deck that released a soft fog across the surface. Her eyes widened in shock. She tried to act tough, but the mist clung to her shoes, making her skid slightly. I watched from my lounge chair, sipping a drink, pretending to casually observe, while the sensors flawlessly captured every moment of her struggle. Karen lunged at the poolside, attempting to remove what she thought were annoying devices. Instead, another sensor detected her proximity and activated a shimmering light along the perimeter. She flinched, almost falling backward, her frustration visibly mounting. Her attempts to retaliate only played into my plan. The sensors turned her aggression into an almost choreographed display of chaos, every stomp, flail, and yell magnified for effect. Neighbors, now fully aware of the spectacle, peeked over fences or leaned out of windows, some giggling quietly, others filming on their phones. Karen, usually fearless, now found herself the unwilling star of her own humiliation. The backyard had become a theater, and she was both performer and audience, trapped by her own temper. She paused near the gate, trying to collect herself, only to trigger a subtle mist that slid across the threshold. She jumped back, yelling, "This is harassment!" I smiled, knowing every reaction was being recorded by the hidden cameras linked to the sensors. Her attempts to fight back had only amplified the situation. Every aggressive move she made, every angry shout, every misstep became proof of her overreaction, perfectly documented. Karen's frustration reached a boiling point. She stomped, glared, and muttered incoherently, yet the sensors maintained control, creating a controlled chaos that she could neither escape nor subvert. It was almost poetic. Her own rage had become the instrument of her downfall. She had walked into my backyard expecting confrontation, only to become a spectacle of confusion and embarrassment, with the hidden sensors orchestrating the entire scene. Finally, she froze mid-step, her face a mask of disbelief and fury, realizing her every attempt to retaliate had backfired spectacularly. The backyard had won, the sensors had won, and her own temper had played right into the trap. Karen's breathing was ragged, her hands trembling slightly as she glanced around, realizing the situation had completely spiraled out of her control. Every step, every flinch, every shout had been anticipated and amplified by the sensors. Her usual aura of authority and entitlement had completely evaporated. Now, desperation had replaced it, and it was written all over her face. She tried to speak, but words failed her. Every accusation, every demand to turn off these ridiculous devices came out jumbled and frantic. She stomped toward the gate, then froze mid-step as a subtle light shimmered along her path. She glanced down, then back at me, panic clear in her eyes. The sensors were guiding her, almost like invisible hands, controlling her movements without her realizing it. Karen attempted one last aggressive move, lunging toward the pool's edge, perhaps thinking she could assert control. But another sensor triggered a harmless mist across the deck, catching her off guard. She slipped slightly, grasping at nothing, her arms flailing as she struggled to maintain balance. Her face went redder with frustration and humiliation. Every reaction she had was now a display of chaos, each one perfectly captured for anyone watching. Neighbors were fully invested. Phones were out, whispers spread through the street, and a few even stepped out to observe more closely. Karen, who once flaunted her authority and wielded intimidation like a weapon, was now a spectacle of panic and embarrassment. The sensors, silent and unyielding, had turned the tables entirely. Her fury was now self-defeating, each movement causing more disruption than the last. Her voice finally broke into a high-pitched scream, a mixture of anger and helplessness. She stomped back and forth, gesturing wildly, only to trigger another sequence, a faint chime, a flicker of light and a subtle mist that brushed her sleeves. Each effect was harmless, yet completely disorienting, driving her closer to an unavoidable breakdown. She spun in circles, realizing her efforts to regain control were futile. Finally, she stopped near the gate, chest heaving, eyes wide, staring at me with disbelief and fury. The backyard had won. The sensors had won. Her panic, her desperation, and her inability to control the situation were all on display for anyone watching. Karen's ultimate breakdown had arrived, and it was both dramatic and unforgettable. Karen stood frozen by the gate, drenched in sweat from panic and exertion, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The once confident figure who had barged into my pool now looked small, defeated, and completely exposed. The backyard, my carefully orchestrated domain, had exacted its revenge through the hidden sensors, turning her aggression into a spectacle of embarrassment. Every neighbor who had witnessed the chaos now had a story to tell about Karen's meltdown. I stepped closer, casually sipping my drink, pretending to inspect a pool float, while the sensors continued their silent work, recording every twitch of her hands, every exasperated shout, every stunned pause. Karen's glare tried to pierce me, but her energy was spent. She had no argument left, no clever comeback, only the realization that her actions had completely backfired. Her presence in my backyard had turned her own behavior against her, a perfect demonstration of poetic justice. Her attempts to regain composure only made matters worse. She stomped once, twice, and triggered a subtle light sequence along the path she had taken earlier. She jumped back, eyes widening, realizing the backyard had become a stage and she was the unwilling performer. Each step she had taken had been tracked, each movement anticipated. The sensors had been invisible, yet their impact was undeniable. Her meltdown had become both a warning and a spectacle for anyone watching. Neighbors whispered and laughed quietly, some even filming on their phones. Karen realized she had lost not just the battle in my backyard, but her dignity in front of the entire street. Her tantrums, her demands, her attempts at intimidation, all documented, all amplified, all undeniable. The sensors had done more than protect. They had taught a lesson in humility. Karen had walked into my backyard with the intent to intimidate, but she left with her own pride shattered. Finally, she muttered something under her breath, stormed out, and disappeared from view. The backyard was quiet again, except for the faint hum of the sensors, still quietly monitoring. Still recording, still victorious. I leaned back, a smile playing on my lips, satisfied. The perfect combination of planning, technology, and patience had worked flawlessly. Karen had underestimated the situation, and the sensors had ensured she'd never forget it. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the pool. Peace returned to my backyard, and the story of Karen's epic humiliation became one I and the neighborhood would remember for a long time. Every reaction had been priceless, and the lesson was clear: never mess with someone prepared. If you enjoyed watching Karen completely lose it, don't forget to hit like, share your favorite moment in the comments, and subscribe so you never miss another crazy HOA story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.